Well, thank you. It's great to be here today. John got a hold of me about a year ago and asked me if I was interested in coming to Idaho. And I said, absolutely. That's one of the places that I have not spoken before. So it's exciting for me to be here to see the local food scene. And I really want to thank the group for inviting me here. Also, a big thanks to all the sponsors. What I'm going to do today, John had asked me if I'd share my family's journey. The journey we've been on the past 20 plus years in moving into a more regenerative type system. This is our ranch back in 1991 when my wife and I purchased it. The outlined area shows the outline of our ranch. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is the journey we've been on. And this ranch that we're on, it's a 5,000 acre ranch, of which about 2,000 acres is true perennial native range, never been touched with steel. There's 1,000 acres of land that was once cultivated and now it's in perennial grasses and alfalfas, and then we have 2,000 acres of cropland. My father-in-law and mother-in-law had bought it back in 1956, and they used pretty much conventional practices for all those years. And I remember when my wife and I, after we finished college and moved back onto their place, I was from the city, so I had to learn everything. And at that time, I was learning it from my father-in-law. And he made this statement, and it stuck with me. He said, the more you work the soil, the better it is. And that stuck with me a long time because I noticed over time that we'd be tilling the soil early in the spring, and then we'd be begging for moisture come later in the fall. We're in an area that gets about 15 inches of annual precipitation. Of that, approximately 10 falls as rain, and the other 5 is from our 70 plus inches of snow. So we get about 15 inches of moisture. There's no irrigation where I'm at. It's all dry land. Well, my in-laws farm this conventionally, as I said, tillage, half summer fallow, half crop, as far as the cropland's concerned. And those crops were always small grains, spring wheat, oats, and barley. They used synthetic salat, synthetic fertilizer, pesticides, fungicides, herbicides. And I was fortunate when we bought the place in 1991, I did some soil testing, and our organic matter levels on that cropland were 1.7 to 1.9%. Now, to give you some perspective, true native range in that area, if it's been managed, well managed, it'll be in the 7 to 8% range. So in other words, we had burned off over 3/4 of the carbon off of that soil through tillage. And I was also fortunate that the first year we bought it, I had NRCS come out and they did some infiltration rates, on the cropland, and we could only infiltrate 1/2 inch of moisture per hour. Well, in our area, most of our rain comes as thunderstorms, and it's gonna rain over more than 1/2 inch. So in other words, we weren't capturing that raindrop. As far as the pasture land, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time today, there just isn't enough time to talk about our grazing system, but when we got there was only 3 pastures. They were season-long grazing. We ran our pairs on that pasture, and then we typically fed the cows for 6 to 7 months, which it's common in our area. Cattle are confined to lots for most of the winter. Well, in 1993, I had a good friend in the northern part of North Dakota who was a no-tiller and realized in the county I'm in, there's about 600,000 plus acres of cropland, there were no no-tillers, 0 of them. Well, this friend of mine, he talked to me about no-till, and he said, Gabe, you need to go no-till to save moisture and time. And so he said, but if you do that, sell all your tillage equipment. That way you're never tempted to go back. And I actually did that. We sold all our tillage equipment, bought this no-till drill in 1993, and I've been 100% zero-till ever since, as I'll show you. First year of no-till was great. We were primarily raising small grains. We had a bumper crop, and I thought, boy, life is pretty easy. 1994 came along, and I added peas to the rotation, Wanted to add a legume to fix some nitrogen, so we added peas. 1995 came along, and the day before we were going to start combining 1,200 acres of spring wheat, I lost 100% of our crop to hail. That's pretty tough when you're a family starting out. We had no crop insurance because it had hailed there once in the previous 35 years. So we just didn't think hail insurance was a good thing to buy. Well, after that hailstorm, I was without feed for our cow herd, so I started thinking, okay, how can I produce some more feed? So obviously I had learned about mycorrhizal fungi a little bit and how mycorrhizal fungi will transfer nutrients. And so we went in and seeded winter triticale and hairy vetch in the fall to try and produce some feed, a legume and a grass. And that was my first foray, so to speak, into what's now called cover cropping, although at that time, I'll be honest with you, I had no idea what cover cropping was. 1996 came along and we added corn to the rotation. I'm trying to expand my crop rotation a little bit, get a warm season grass into the rotation. However, 96, we had another year of hail. We lost 100% of our crop to hail again. So that's 2 years in a row. Immediately after the hailstorm, it occurred in early August, we went in there and seeded this combination of cowpeas, Proso, millet, and buckwheat. And what we were trying to do is just produce some forage for the livestock. So that was another delve into cover cropping. By that time, though, the banker was getting pretty irritable, and I found this saying by Mark Twain, and I really like it. A banker is a fellow who lends you his umbrella when the sun is shining, but wants it back when it begins to rain. And that's kind of how I felt after those 2 years, because the banker was no longer willing to loan me any money for inputs, obviously because I hadn't paid him back for 2 years. So I had to start doing some thinking, how can I do this on my own? Well, 1997 came along and we dried out. Nobody combined an acre. It was an extreme drought where we were at. And at that time, I was starting to read more to try and educate myself a bit. And I came across Alan Savory's work on holistic management. And we started doing some work on our pastures. I had mentioned that there was 3 pastures when we bought the place. We started to do some cross fencing, rotating our cattle around, and it actually extended the grazing season for us considerably. And we noticed an improvement in the health of our pastures by doing that. However, after 3 years of crop failure, the piggy bank was looking a little bit skimpy by then. And the banker was also getting a little irritable. I was very fortunate in that he did not have a lien on our land. So he was kind of like forced into sticking with me if he wanted a chance of collecting anything back at all. I also then, in that winter of 97, 98, I attended a class on holistic management. And there was a guy by the name of Don Campbell there. And Don Campbell said this to me, and I'll never forget it. He said, if you want to make small changes, change how you do things. But if you want to make major changes, change the way you see things. And that stuck with me then, because it was like a light bulb went on in my head. I had to start looking at things differently if I was going to survive, if our operation was going to survive. And I really came to this conclusion. The greatest roadblock in solving a problem is the human mind. For years, I had been influenced and told that things would only work in a certain way. But I had to figure out, how can I get them to work differently? What I really came to the conclusion that all those things I was seeing on my operation were really symptoms of a degraded resource. Whether it be the lack of the moisture or poor fertility, it seemed over the years I was adding more and more synthetics to try and get the same yield. Seeing some compaction issue, weeds, and the list goes on and on. But in my mind, I really came to the conclusion that all I was doing was treating symptoms. I needed to focus on solving problems instead of treating symptoms, because that's the only way I was going to advance my operation, is if I could truly find out what's the problem and then address that. A friend of mine, Ray Archuleta, put this slide together, and I think it's really well. It's really a slide worth noting. It says, this soil is naked, hungry, thirsty, and running a fever. Well, that's what I had been doing with my soils, is I had not been taking care of them. And I came to this conclusion. I was really disconnected from the land. I was a farmer, but I didn't know about the soil. So how do we improve soil health? That's the question I had to ask myself. What did I need to do to improve the health of my soil? And I found the answer by looking at a native rangeland ecosystem. What was here before we started farming? It was native rangeland. How did that function? Take a look at the ecosystem and pay attention. Look at the way nature does things. There's no mechanical disturbance out there. There's armor on the soil surface at all times. You don't see bare soil in nature unless it's a catastrophic event. Nature cycles water. You know, I was in a 15-inch rainfall environment, moisture environment, yet we always had perennial forages there. There's a network of living plant roots that are taking place throughout the year for as long as possible. Nutrient cycling occurs all the time. You know, we weren't adding synthetics to that soil, so how does native rangeland produce? And then look, there's thousands upon thousands of years in research and development. So many times now I travel across North America talking about soil health, and people ask, where's the proof? And I said, well, I've got thousands of years of proof. It's the current production model that has very little research and development. Then in 1998, I started adding more mixes, like this is cowpeas and Sudan grass. I wanted to diversify the rotation, and so we started to capitalize on that benefit of mycorrhizal fungi and started planting species together. And then we started integrating the livestock onto those cover crops, and I found an improvement in soil health by doing that. However, 1998 brought this again, and so we ended up losing 4 crops in a row to drought and hail. And I tell you what, that's pretty tough, but I tell people today, absolutely the best thing that could have happened to our operation. I wouldn't be standing in front of you today if we wouldn't have lost those 4 years of crop production, because they forced me to make a change. So I wasn't going to give up, though. The neighbors were all taking bets on how long I'd last and if they could buy my farmland. But I really thought about it, and I needed to educate my mind and educate myself as to the importance of soils. And I really needed to focus on the way nature did things, because all through those 4 years of drought and hail, my perennial pastures were still producing. So I needed to learn from that, and how do I apply that to my cropland? Well, in perennial system, you have all these roots storing carbon, building organic matter, cycling nutrients, doing all the things a healthy soil should, but I wasn't mimicking that on my cropland.